Okay, so it's just preparing the live stream. So I think that it's functioning.
Yeah, I'm seeing the indicator on my side too.
Sweet, okay.
Nice, we've already got a couple guests that have joined.
Oh, nice, awesome. Super duper. There we go. Okay, so the live stream is just going, I think, which is sweet. If only we had that awesome waiting room music going.
All right.
Yeah, maybe some of those smooth jazz tracks, perhaps.
Lo-fi hip hop. That's my personal fave. Nice.
All right.
Yeah, I'll see people coming in. Hi, Mika, joiner.
Hi, everybody. Nice. Awesome. People just like on time and so impressed.
Punctual fam.
Yeah. We're keen on the tables today. I love that. It's how we party on Fridays.
It is Friday. Jeez.
It is.
Thanks for reminding me.
I was putting a bunch of posts out like on Twitter and stuff. And I was like kind of joking about like, this is how you party on your Friday. And
yeah,
I don't know if it came off like that or not, but hey, that's okay.
Nice. Well, as we wait for more people to join, maybe the ones that already did join, you can maybe let us know where you're joining us from. I personally would be really curious to know if we've reached Montreal peeps, Vancouver peeps. So let us know. Oh, Dubai.
Nice.
Kelowna. Sweet.
And if you do want to put your emoji of the day, that's just
an emoji
fun.
can say so much.
It can.
Single image.
Yeah. And that's that's why we've littered them all over this presentation. So
yep. Be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, nice.
Victoria. Nice.
Oh, really? Oh, awesome. Victoria peeps. And yeah, so we'll just wait like a couple more minutes maybe before we launch right in there.
Yeah, let's leave a bit more room for people to join.
Just for
the people that are oh, so what?
I was just making a joke how Zoom takes a long time to load.
That is true. But yeah, while we wait, I just want to make sure people know they can jot down some, as we go in the presentation, they can jot down some questions in the Q&A feature inside Zoom, and we'll make sure to keep some time at the end just for those.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, San Francisco. Hi, Harper.
Woo. Representing from the tech places. That's great.
I'm getting a question in the chat. Is this title an oxymoron? I'm not 100% sure what that means, but is it?
I do.
Is it like two words for the same meaning or something?
It's like, yeah, it's like ironic sort of thing. So like, would you level up your UX game by using data tables is probably what they mean.
Okay, yeah,
like,
I get it.
Get rid of the tables if you want to have such a good user experience.
Hopefully, we will show you ways to actually level up using tables.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, once you see these ideas, you're gonna be like, I wish I could use this table. Be like my most exciting UX experience, user experience coming up. This is where the noisemaker sound effect thing is I'm gonna get one and it's gonna jazz things up.
Populate these silences.
Yes.
All right, well, I mean, we could start to get going. I don't know if
Yeah,
we
we
want to
totally
give
could.
this more time or slowly get into it.
Yeah, I think it would be good. We might as well get going. Great. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. As you can probably tell already, Fanny and I are like super pumped to tell you all about tables. So, so we'll just kind of start off and talk a little bit about who we are. So I'll just introduce myself first. So I'm Kira Crawshaw. Yes, you pronounce it with a hard C. It's weird. And so I've been in the UX world for a while now. I came here through science communications and kind of content and explaining complexity. And that sort of led into working in user experience in biotech and fintech and enterprise sort of contexts. And I'm the founder
Sweet.
of Pencil and Paper.
By the way, nice. Yeah. As for me, my name is Fanny Vasilatos. I work with the P&P crew on a bunch of really fun and puzzling projects. So I also enjoy the complexity very much. I've always gravitated around enterprise software in industries such as B2B marketing, fintech, and education. So I'm really pumped to share some knowledge with you.
Awesome. And yeah, so Pencil and Paper, just to kind of let you know where we're coming from as a company. So we are a specialist user experience design firm for complex industries. So that includes fintech, biotech, all those kind of things. And what we really sort of live to do is to set the standards and best practices for user experience design in these complex industries and increase people's cognitive potential in their work and in their life as well.
Yeah, so about the pattern analysis library, this webinar is part of a bigger initiative that we've been working on. So you might have seen us share some of these on LinkedIn or Twitter. But if you're not familiar, we're kind of building out a knowledge base of everything enterprise UX design. So we've already published a couple pieces. These are long form, very detailed articles. So data tables is the subject at hand today, but we've also got some writing about loading feedback, interactive states, and we've just published yesterday a piece about filtering. So this is what we're doing currently. And we wanted to share a bit about our motivation behind this initiative. So the reasons why we kind of felt the need to create this content is really based in, we realized there was a lack of enterprise focused resources. A lot of the UX design content you can find on there is consumer based, consumer app based, and also e-commerce focused, and not that much of it is about enterprise. And we kind of feel we want to break this culture of gatekeeping in a way where maybe a reason for this is because companies like invest a lot of time and effort into creating custom and very specific solutions to some problems that they might not want to just share openly on the internet. And that's exactly what we want to break. So we made sure we created stuff you can't just Google, and created what we wish we could have found before, basically.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, so we're going to start off with tables. And so this was the first article that we wrote and published in like mid-February. We got a lot of really good feedback on it. So there was a few people like redesigning their tables sort of like right as they read the article and giving us like a lot of good feedback on it. So it was really awesome. So we thought what we would do is just sort of kick off this series of chats with our tables content and sort of build up from there every couple of weeks. So why did we start with tables? So the thing that we found a lot is like there is always a table going on, especially with data heavy applications where you have just kind of, you have to expose that information, right? And tables kind of end up being a little bit underrated or underrepresented or sort of brushed over. And so we wanted to kind of start with that and document, these solutions that we've worked through on like multiple projects and the knowledge that we've built over that time, so that hopefully in time we can elevate the overall user experience that people should expect from a table. All right. Yeah, so from this session, so what you're going to get out of it is you'll be able to really understand and consider the scope of your project or your table screen or screens or whatever the case is. You'll also be able to understand what some of the best practices are for the majority of the use cases that you're going to see. And then, of course, you can ask specific questions. So if you've been struggling with tables a bit, you can ask us and we can help you out. All right, so let's get into the content. So to kind of set the scene for your table design, we've exposed some things that you might want to consider as you're kind of launching into this process. So the first thing, some of the prompts that you're going to want to ask yourself and your team would be around the type of data that will be contained in your cells. So what you'd want to do is do a mapping exercise to really understand the complexity of your data, and you'll get an idea of the scope of effort that's going to be required to represent the contents of your table. So when you kind of do this mapping exercise, you'll want to know if there's short numerical strings, like dates, are there amounts, do they have units, blah, blah, blah. You'll really want to understand your data really well. And then maybe you might also encounter things like paragraphs of text or links or files or things that are maybe a little bit trickier in terms of representing them in a table.
Right. And then you also want to make sure you understand what your users are coming in expecting to be able to do. So they can come in with the intention of just manipulating the data, moving stuff around, rearranging the view to enhance like a scanning workflow or just reading and comparing values, versus coming in with actions to do, like deleting files, assigning people, updating statuses. So these two different axes have different patterns that can be used to enhance those interactions.
Then you'll also want to think about how flexible you want your table to be. So do you want to create maybe customizable viewing options? So you might want to start thinking about these questions. So how much help do you want to be providing users in accessing what they want to see? How specific do you want to get in allowing them to do that through the mechanisms like searching and filtering and sorting, display density, all of those sort of things. So it's not necessarily that you would define this all up front, but it's a good thing to start to get a dialogue going, even if that's just an internal dialogue for you if you're working by yourself.
Nice. So now that we've got already some ideas going around in your brains concerning your projects, we're going to jump in and look at some really actionable patterns you can consider using. But first, a little FYI, I just want to mention that we will not be touching on the very basics in this session. So things such as text alignment, the different division styles that you might want to use. So those very core basic elements are covered on the article. So you can check that out if you do need that information. But just to make sure we make the most out of this session, we're going to skip over to more exciting stuff. Such as the fun things you can do to elevate your data. So before jumping into like the interactions you might want to build, there are some improvements you can bring to the data itself that will level up the experience overall. So let's jump right in. First fun thing, you can combine related data. So let's look at this example where we see every single cell, every single field is split out into a different column. So there's like a lot of information. It's a bit hard to read, let's say. It's a very small example, but let's go with that idea. So we've got contact, employer, package type, package value, and everything's kind of spread out. So for columns that don't necessarily need a filtering of their own or a sorting mechanism of their own, you could combine them and have merged cells basically live together. And here you can really leverage text hierarchy to tone down the importance of some fields and make it more readable and easier to scan. And then next, you can group related rows. So it's a similar idea, but with the rows. So in this example here, we've got a list of items that have been sold, where we see their price, the quantity, and also the associated invoice number, which could potentially be repeated a lot. So if an invoice has 10 different items, you'd have a lot of different rows to scroll through. So if you group related rows together with something like a subheader, in this case, we can put the invoice number as a subheader and group the related rows together, make it easier to scan. And you also now have a new space to put the total, let's say, that we didn't have in the example before. And then there's also a lot of ways you can include imagery in your tables. For example, here, it's a list of files, and we can see they're all image files. So you can maybe already guess where I'm going with it, but we're also seeing usernames or uploaded by a person, right? So something you can do is bring up a thumbnail for these images and an avatar for these usernames. And so what's fun is now that we have a thumbnail, we also get new information such as, oh, I can quickly notice that cover image is a portrait format versus that banner photo is a horizontal format. So if I had forgotten that for some reason and I had just the text to refer to, now I get more information with these images. Another way you can add some images is with icons. In this example here, we've got a filter option at the top left, a density picker on the top right, and year over year, like increases or decreases percentages. So this is just very functional. It does work. I'm able to read date period. I'll eventually understand. I can pick a date, pick the density, but bringing icons can really just accelerate that process even more. So just the recognition of a calendar icon is like an automatic thing in your brain. So it makes it that much easier to just understand what's available. And with the year over year deltas, you just have even quicker feedback of the trend going up or the trend going down. And also the color coding here is, I mean, it doesn't get more clear than that. Green is good, red is bad. So it's just enhancing the visual scannability in a very easy way with visuals. So speaking of color coding, another use case for it could be status column. So in here we've got different statuses such as approved, pending, and denied. And so having a color coding system to just make it even more scannable is a really quick win. So in the example right after this, it makes it clear, like my eye is attracted to the red, and I can quickly just get an action done on whatever needs to be done. Something else you can do is render your progress indicators into visual progress bars. So in this example here, it's a list of different projects, and they're all at different levels. So one of them is just started at 15%, and then a little bit lower there, we can see one is almost done at 84%. So with numbers, there's a little bit extra work that needs to come from the user to understand and process those numbers. And then if you do just input a visual progress bar in there, you really have a clear distinction of what's almost done, what can I not stress about versus what needs my attention now. So like maybe these earlier phases of the projects. And if you've got units of measurements in your tables, there's different things you can do to make sure it's very easy to scan, easy to read. So in here, there's a bit of confusion that can be possible because first of all, we've got different units of measures for different items in the same table. So the pencil being measured in millimeters, with the notebook being measured in centimeters and the desk in meters, it makes it very hard to kind of scan and quickly see the bigger values and the smaller values. So what we can do is not only standardize those measures and all make it fit into the same system, but also toning down the repeated cm, mm, the repeated measure. We will eventually make it that I don't even see it and I can quickly focus on the values. And the next level of that is to bring the unit of measurement directly in the header, removing it all together from the rows and cleaning up the table even more. So you're reducing visual noise, making it super clear what actually needs to be read.
Awesome. All right, so our next section around patterns is really talking about the viewing options that you can make available to your users. So here we've got the option to freeze columns. So if you're freezing the top or the leftmost column, this is a great thing to use, especially if you have a situation where you've got a lot of fields and you do have to do a horizontal scroll. You can still keep the context of the thing that the subject of the row effectively. Yeah, and then here we have the option to add, remove, and reorder columns. So this is a really handy like 2 feature sets, I guess. And it's not always possible to really make an intuitive ordering and kind of priority around all of the columns that you're going to have in a table. So it's really handy if you have users with really diverse needs. So they either are looking at the same information and they don't have the same use cases, or they look at information, but they're actually asking distinct questions of that table at separate times. Or you have a situation as well where you could have custom fields in a table. So you're creating a lot of kind of unknowns in that process. So if you're allowed to add and remove columns as you feel and then reorder them, if the user can do that and they can really get an intuitive sort of view, then that's really, really handy for them. And definitely covers you in a lot of cases that you couldn't map because you can't necessarily talk to all your users. But the trick here is that you do need to allow them to be brought back really easily. So the kind of clear all type of idea. And another thing you can consider if you are going to take an approach like this is the possibility of putting in some analytics so that you can actually understand over time, over more aggregated sort of data, what people are actually looking at. Okay, yeah, another fave is resizing your columns. So this is the big use case for this is unpredictable data. So we talked a little bit about custom fields before, but also the values that end up populating in that column. You can have just a wild variety in there. And if you need to sustain a whole bunch of columns being shown and you need to do a visual scan across them and you're doing comparison and stuff like that, it's really nice if you can give the user control of how wide those columns actually are. So it's great for really long things. So I've definitely seen a couple cases where you have users who actually use a naming convention, like in their project name, let's say, and it's like, variables that have an underscore. So they actually want it to be very long and that will enable them to scan. So how will they do that if you put in an ellipsis in there and they can't resize? And then the other context there too would be short content. So sometimes you have like a yes, no, for example, and then a really long label. So you could get around that in that case. And then another viewing option is the density, the display density. So this is often a similar case to when you're doing that comparison across like a lot of columns and you do need them in order to do that work. And so columns and rows, actually, I should say. So what you can do is basically reduce the white space. So almost, in my view, make it less comfortable to read. But we've seen a lot of examples in user testing where they're like, I want to make this the densest display possible, and people legitimately want that. So this allows that to happen without forcing everyone to kind of be a super user in that sense. With these different options, viewing options, you do want to consider state persistence as you go. So, allowing users to do this setup is great if you can keep it through the browser session. So, say they do these modifications and then they actually go into a row and then they come back. And every time they come back, they have to adjust the screen again. Will make them, quite mad, I would think. And then there's other cases where it's actually like a user account setting too. So these are things that you'd want to explore, do user testing around, and kind of find out the approach that you want to take sooner rather than later, because it's quite a subtle user experience thing, but the development team need to try hard to make this kind of thing happen. And then another thing to consider as well is that, resetting interaction as well, on the flip side of keeping things the same. And so in order for people to feel really comfortable and feel that they're not going to like break the screen, allowing them to reset things and showing that is very easy to do and almost instantaneous is really beneficial. All right, so we're just going to talk about moving around, basic navigation within a table. So one approach that you can take to sort of ease the movement of the user around the table is the use of a fixed header. So this is very handy if you're in a situation where the container for the table is smaller than the content, which happens quite often. And well, I mean, so many screen sizes, you can't always really predict that. It does happen a lot as well with situations like dashboards. So where you have different data visualization things, and then you have smaller tables sort of interspersed in there, that will happen a lot in there. Another thing is that for an unfamiliar table as well, it's something to consider. So by that, what I mean is it's not a table that users are looking at every day as part of their everyday workflow. And so they're not going to know by the values in the table what the column is. It's just not going to happen. So it's really handy for that. And then the other thing is too, if you have filters that are actually nested within your columns, it's really handy to be showing those at all times, because it's very easy to forget what filter you did before lunch compared to after lunch. You can also use a fixed footer as well. So one of the main use cases that we see here is displaying sums. So if this is really important and you're doing sort of sums of information and adding things up, you can always see that. It's very handy to be able to see.
Right. Now, what if your users are coming in with a clear intention of searching for something? They know what they're coming in looking for. There's different ways you can include sorting and filtering mechanisms inside your tables. So let's look at those. The very quickest win you can tackle is to include sorting arrows. So you've probably seen them before. They're a quick win in that they have a very simple logic. It's an icon, and it just takes a list that has a ascending or descending order and flips it over. So that's a surefire way to just provide one level of findability. And then a second level could be providing a drop-down menu, but in the same sorting arrows. The second level for sorting could be to provide a drop-down menu with different options for sorting. So either alphabetical, A to Z and Z to A, or by recency, newest on top to lowest, to oldest, and the opposite, or by size if you've got amounts or measurements in there. And then the second level, the third level maybe, is to include filters. So as we've said with the fixed header pattern, having the filters live exactly inside your headers is a very what's the word? Contextualized is the most contextualized way for you to provide filters. So this is really practical when you've got a page made up of other things apart from your table. So if you have a dashboard with a couple charts above and then a table like mid-page, you want to make sure your filters are exactly above the content that they're affecting. So having the headers double as filters is a really good solution for those localized filters. And then thirdly, if your table does take up the whole page, there's different ways you can have in-page filtering. So dedicating a sidebar that can scale up to the whole page height is a really good way to give it a lot of room, where if you have like very advanced filters and you have like additive variables and you have maybe an advanced filtering, you need that room. But it could also be a horizontal bar that just spans across the page that can live really above the table.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, so then you know, within a table, you may want to apply interactions to it. You may want to do some stuff, basically. So so here we've got basically an expandable row. So these can be used as a quick reference type use case. So by showing the hover state over the row as a whole, that implies that you're doing something to this thing as a whole, which you're expanding it to show you more information. So that's a handy thing to use, especially if you're doing kind of a quick reference type context, where you know the majority of the information most times on the table is fine, but you will have a situation where you need to go, okay, let me just check this thing. Okay, yes, that's good, and continue. And so, yeah, so if you're in a situation as well where you have more in-depth data that you might want to display, so you can use something like a modal or just a container within the page. So a situation might be an image display, attachment within your cell. Basically anything that doesn't really belong in a cell, you can expose in a separate container, kind of overlaid on the page and initiated from the row. So we kind of show a bit of a generic way to initiate that in this case, but there would be several different ways to do that. All right, you can also use a side panel as well. So this is really handy when you have, again, variable content that's going to just grow and go crazy, and also content that doesn't necessarily look good this way, looks better read sort of sequentially like that. Could be really handy for things that are not actually captured all the time for a row. So things like notes are a good example. So people may not make a note on every single row, but it's super nice to be able to expose that note really easy. You could also use a side panel type of thing for extra information like logs or like a history about that thing or whatever the case is. All right, so then multi-select actions. These can also happen in your table. And so there's various different ways to do this. But the use case overall is that you need to do the same action to multiple things at once. So this is like very enterprisey, that you get sort of this bulk action type of need from users. And so here, what we're showing is it's quite like a nice thing to look at. You don't see a lot of clutter, but when you hover over Alexander Finn, you see that, oh, you can actually select this, and then the actions that you can apply also would show up there as well. So so you can use, especially in a really kind of intense table, you can expose the actions sort of piece by piece rather than maybe like spraying buttons like all over your table. And then, yeah, so then editing data is also very important for lots of different tables. So one way that you can enable that to happen is to do a really simple, almost instantaneous sort of interaction that's shown here, where you can just do in-cell editing like right away. And so that's really appropriate for lower stake data. So it's not going to, break your machine, make it explode. It has very few clicks. There is a bit more opportunity for error that could be introduced because it's just so seamless. And this also, it wouldn't have a confirmation as well. So it's for those sort of low stakes situations. And then we have another approach to editing data that you could take. So this is a mode switch type of approach. So I'm kind of pressing edit, and then I'm allowing the editing of all of the fields, and then I'm having a explicit submit action or trigger. And so the idea there is that it introduces a bit of friction, but it's higher stakes, so you want to make sure you're sure before you submit that data. And then you can also use a modal as well, or like a larger container, in order to do your editing on a table. And so this is very handy if you have maybe even more fields that you want to expose than are shown here and things like that. If you have form validation that's required, so as in relationships between fields that you need to make sure kind of fit. So if you select one thing, it'll make this other thing not apply or whatever. If there's more logic in there, you need more UI in order to do that, basically. Oh, wow. And we're on to Q&A. We did it. Yay. All right.
Nice. Yeah, so we've gone through everything we wanted to share. Of course, there's more again in the article itself, but yeah, we hope this was useful. We do have some questions in the chat, in the Q&A.
Oh.
So other peeps that might just be now coming up with questions, feel free to drop them in there. We'll try to go through them all. So should I read you one?
Yeah, sure.
Nice. Okay, well, first one I think is going to be a bit tricky. So be prepared. With column freeze, how can it be managed for a mobile device layout? The freeze column can take a lot of space in mobile vertical view, leaving no or very small room for information to scroll at all, right? So yeah. Anonymous attendee, great question. But there are a couple caveats to consider for mobile. First off, you might not want to recreate the exact same experience for your table on a desktop than on mobile. So one suggestion we default to is to offer maybe your users a kind of wizard or an additional step before accessing the table, where they get to kind of pick and choose a maximum amount of columns that they might want to see. So chances are they don't have the same workflow when they're on their phone in a taxi versus at their desk and focus, right? So you can give them the opportunity to pick, oh, when I'm out and about on my phone, I want to see client name, date, then A, B, C, and D, and that's it. And you can set a max there to have less complexity to deal with in that smaller screen, right? So, because I'm not seeing a column freeze work very well on mobile. What do you think, Kira?
Well, I mean, it'll depend how short it is, and the overall experience. So if sometimes I've seen it where you can go into a full screen mode also, and like turn your phone like this, and so if the frozen column is not super wide, then you can make some progress. But it's really interesting with the mobile because it's like too small this way and too small this way. So a fixed header would also be handy, so yeah, your real estate gets out of there really fast. So if you, as you say, Fanny, you can prioritize some of those fields, or maybe use a card type of thing if you don't need to do like a direct comparison, like a visual scanning type of comparison can be another approach that you take.
Right. Well, anonymous attendee, if you have a follow-up question, leave it in there again. Oh, Chris is actually answering that question right now. Maybe pinch zoom display could be useful too.
Yeah.
In a mobile table.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So Harper here has 2 questions. Let's start with number 1. What's a good example of a product today that uses good table / UX practice with complex amount of data for even a common user? What do you like about them and why?
Ooh.
I
can think of a lot.
Do you have something that comes to mind? Yeah, that's it. I was about to say a similar thing because working on this article, I dug the internet for table examples, right? I've seen them all. And it's like every single, they all have different wins and different downsides. And even if there was like one really good, outstanding product that was like nailing tables, they would be nailing it because of the way their data is structured and the way they know their users. So it's such a, you know what I mean? It's such a specific way to get to there's such custom solutions to these.
Yeah, I would say one might be Airtable.
Yeah, Alexi was just answering Airtable.
Yeah, and because they have rich examples, I think that's what makes their thing demo really well, is that they have a lot of different kind of ways that people have worked that data and like kind of can use their feature set to make it shine. But yeah, that's like the only one that I can think of right now.
And then Harper's second question was, when a table starts getting too complex, how do you prioritize / compromise information when a lot of it is important?
Yeah. It's really hard.
For me, like this sounds to me like the key is to not focus so much on understanding how you as the system should prioritize the information, but instead focus on building a wide range of tools for the users to customize it themselves, right? So if you go with features such as reorder and hide, they can themselves like pick and choose, this is kind of too noisy for me. I can skip those columns and focus on the data I need for my workflow. And then kind of you let them be the ones who decide and compromise on what's shown. So that's one thing.
Yeah, and I think too, like when you do have really like table heavy interfaces that have like, let's say like 3 or 4 steps to their workflow, you can sometimes match the columns that you include in each of your tables to that specific part of the workflow, and like just prioritize columns that don't matter as much as they did on step 1 as they did on step 4, as they do on step 4 type of thing. That's another sort of concept. But then you always do get like power users that are like, I want to see all of the fields.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's a really good one.
But it's, conversations with users that really help some of that come out for sure.
True.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you how to prioritize and what to compromise for sure. Nice. And then we have Naman with a question, which I'm not sure I understand. Let's try together. Okay. Why use Modal and not the side drawer that you used that you shown in the few slides before?
So like, why would you use one versus the other?
Okay, yeah, maybe.
Good question. I mean, why would you use one more than the other, Fanny?
If you've already got a side drawer in your design system, reuse that. But also, a modal might, I was about to say it might not scale as well, but it can. If you have a scroll in there, it can also scale to accommodate like a large amount of data.
Yeah. You could also use it in the sense that like, if you want to define a modal as something that is on the page that's taking all your focus away from the rest of the page. Thinking about that in the sense of like having a dark
right
overlay behind it type of deal. Then you could choose to use a modal in situations where you're like, hey, this is serious. Look at this data and just focus on this, compared to like a side drawer, which are really handy when you want to do maybe a quick check, but you still want the context of the rest of the table to look at. So it's kind of like on the side. Sometimes you can resize them so you can still know the other things while you're also doing a reference check to something else.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. So let us know, Naman, if we've answered that to your liking. And then, another question from Harper about the tools that we use. What are your favorite tools for designing tables? I used to design a lot of UI in Sketch, but just started to use Figma more. So welcome to the Figma club, Harper. I mean, we're already sold on Figma, so that might give you an answer.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Figma's great because you can do a lot of like auto layout and things like that might help you scale your tables. We also had an experiment with plugging it into Google Sheets and like pulling out of data.
Experiment is the right word.
Didn't work the best with avatar photos is what ended up happening, where we had all these names that were repeated and they had a different picture every time. But I could see it, like pulling from using the Google Sheets plugin just for pure data on your rows to be a really handy thing, because then you can have the rows, the values actually within the rows be like somewhat realistic to each other and not just dummy content. So
yeah, totally. So Harper, if you want to explore that stack, we've used Figma with the Google Sheet Sync plugin that you can just install from the community. And what else did we say? Shift A, auto layouts to kind of keep your alignment always easy to manage, and you can just edit the data itself without changing your alignment. So try those in combination and you should have a blast.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay, so we're coming up to our last minute.
And that was the last question. Oh no, there are more questions. Oops, I didn't scroll.
Oh, sorry.
It is on. We're on time now. So
yeah.
What do you want to do?
We'll write an email of some of our suggestions to answer the rest of the questions as a follow-up kind of deal. Yeah, nice. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate you spending the time with us to nerd out about tables. So if you're looking for more content like this, we just published a filters article. So that's live now, so you can check that out. That's going to get pasted in the chat. And stay tuned. We're going to do this every 2 weeks for a while. See what you like, see how it works. So we'll send you a follow-up about that as well. We're also working on a course, UX skills for developers at the moment as well. So if you know any developers or you are a developer that might be interested in upping your UX skills, please check us out. And follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter and dev.to so we can be friends on there and continue the conversation.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the thank yous that we see in the chat. It's sweet.
Oh, that's nice. I hope it was enjoyable and interesting, everyone. Okay.
All right. Well, enjoy your Friday and weekend.
Yay. Okay. Bye-bye.